Bonjour, my name is David DeVere. I'm a wine educator and a traveler, and you are watching Savvy Nomad TV, the Eau de Vie edition. On the Eau de Vie, we talk about wine and food and everything wine and food related. Today, I'm discussing the 100-point scale. Who made it? How do they use it? And why does it matter to you? I've also got a custom wine tasting chart for you to look at to log your own points. This is really going to help you figure out how they came up with that magic 100-point number. This is science and preference coming together in one crazy thing called the 100-point scale. This wine, 91 points. Let's see if it really is, at least to me. Let's put it through the paces right now on Savvy Nomad TV. Now, before I taste this wine and take you through the chart, let's talk about the 100-point scale. In North America, we use it for grades. So A, 100 points, 90, maybe a A minus, a B, a C, a D. We get that. Now in the UK, they use 20 points. Of course, there's 5-star ratings for things. This is just another way to grade somebody's preference. But is that actually true? I think there's a way to use the 100-point scale to actually define whether the wine is quality or not. And what does quality mean? Quality means outside of preference, you can recognize that the wine is good. You might not like the wine, but you can say, oh yes, because of these qualities, this is a high quality wine. But I don't like this style of wine. That is really the magic of the 100-point scale. The challenge is you have to know what the style is before you can accurately grade on the scale. If you've never had a Spanish Monastrell, which is what this is, you don't know what the style is. Therefore, your points are actually going to be kind of worthless. But if you have someone like me tell you, ooh, this tastes like this, this, and this is matching the style, or if you drink a lot of Spanish wine, which you should because it's delicious and cheap. Anyway, if you drink a lot of Spanish wine, you probably know these styles, and you'll start to be able to recognize higher quality wines and lower quality wines. They don't always equal price, but price is a good indication of quality. Shouldn't be. Everybody wants to have a cheap wine. They've got that wine story about, ooh, I found this at the grocery store for $2. Honestly, price is an indication of quality. But if you don't know what that quality is, you still might buy an expensive wine you don't like. That's where this chart's going to help you. Okay, that's point number 1 on the 100-point scale. Let's go into who made the 100-point scale. The 100-point scale was first popularized by Robert Parker in his Wine Advocate newsletter. He never really came out and said how he came up with his 100-point scale, but I did find once an article that very loosely said this is what Robert Parker did. I based my 100-point scale mathematical chart here, that we're going to go over in a minute, on that article. And I had it proofed by a master of wine, Jennifer Simonetti Bryan, many years ago, over a decade ago, when I was learning about wine from her. And she said, wow, this is actually really good and really complicated. This isn't for beginners. But I don't think that's true. You can understand this. I understand it. You can understand it. So Robert Parker came up with a 100-point scale, and James Suckling and the Wine Spectator magazine still use it exclusively. They don't necessarily have the same parameters that I have or the magical parameters that Mr. Parker has, but I've got a link to a video in the description that talks about how Mr. Suckling comes up with his scale. It's a little bit different, and you can watch that. Check the description below. Okay, so let's get into the chart and get into this bottle of wine. Mr. Suckling, by the way, scores this 91 points. Let's see if that holds up. So in the chart, you've got 6 columns because when I would teach a wine class in person, I would often do 6 wines. So this is a 6-column chart. At the top, you've got vintage, the name, the producer, the varietal, the region, and whether it's aged in something. Oak, sometimes concrete, or just stainless steel. Anyway, those are those things. Then you've got color, and we get to our first grading opportunity. But let's open the wine and see how it looks, and we'll fill out the top of the chart. Wine cork or corkscrew, and I've got my temperature probe. This wine just came out of my basement, and it's 60 degrees. That's perfect. So I don't need to worry about chilling this wine. If it's a red wine, you do want to chill it. If it's a white wine, you do want to chill it. What's the magic temperature for all wines? Many years ago, I used to have a very complicated chart that I would hand out to people. But now, I'm all about making it easy. And the easy thing to say is 55 degrees for reds and whites. That's the best thing to have. So, 55 it is. And in later videos, I will show you how to properly chill a wine, in a wine bucket. Okay, the wine is open. I should explain the chart just slightly before I pour and before we start tasting. The base number of your 100-point scale is 50. So the lowest score a wine can have is 55 because there's 5 categories that we're going to give 10 points in each category to. The categories are aroma, acidity, balance, complexity, and finish. How hard is that? Pretty easy. 10 points, 5 categories. I suppose you could give a wine a 0, but you should give them at least 1 point. Anyway, 55 is the lowest, 100 is the most you can have. Now, I've got the wine poured, or I'm going to pour the wine. And back when I was learning about wine, I was trained in the 5 S's. You see, you swirl, you sniff, you sip, and then you savor. So the wine should look nice. It shouldn't have anything floating in it. It shouldn't be cloudy if it's supposed to be clear. If it's a white wine that's got particulates, or if it's a red wine with a lot of cork, you should see that. But we're not actually going to score it on the way it looks. It just looks the way it is. The first thing we're going to do is aroma. Aroma is super important. Most of tasting is actually smelling. Ask someone who lost their sense of smell. It's probably a big bummer for them because everything is bland. So wine is important because you've got all these wonderful aromas that come from the grapes, the maturation process, the fermentation process. Making a wine is really this combination between art and agriculture. They blend together. And that's why there's vintage dates on wines and why they talk about the grapes and where the regions where they're made is very important. All that translates into this concept the French call it terroir and into aroma. The best way to smell a wine is to swirl it like this, stick your nose in, and give it a big sniff. What should it smell like? I know, everyone says the same thing, red grapes. Well, it should smell clean, it should smell refreshing, and it should smell like something. Red berries, maybe cedar box, oak. And if that expression is really grabbing you, really says something, you give it a high score. If there's only a couple things you get, it gets a medium score. And if it doesn't express itself at all, it gets a low score. Simple enough. So for me, in this wine, there's only a few aromas. I'm going to score it a 6. 6 for aroma. Let's go on to tasting it. That's where the magic meets the mouth. This is actually odd. I really want to taste this wine. My mouth is almost salivating at the idea of it. Maybe it's because I've been talking and I've got a little bit dry mouth. But before I do, I need you to look at the chart, because the chart has a bunch of things on here that once we taste it, we need to fill this out. We've got dry or sweet. We've got the body. We've got acidity, next scoring opportunity, balance, complexity, and finish. Whew, that's a lot. That's all from just one taste. Mr. Suckling, who does this for a living, is just taking one taste, spitting it out, and coming up with a number, and bam, either success or commercial failure for that poor winery. Anyway, dry or sweet. Dryness is the absence of sweet. Okay, that seems simple enough. Acidity is the pucker amount in your mouth, that lemony pucker part. It's important because it balances out a lot of the other factors in a wine, and you need good acidity. If you don't have it, the wine feels flabby, which makes it too sweet and too kind of cloying in the mouth. But if the acidity is too high, it will burn the throat. It'll actually shut down the back of your throat, and you'll have a physical reaction to that wine. Balance is this interplay between alcohol, acid, tannin, and sugars. When we get to balance, I'm going to go over that because there's a lot of little pieces playing in there. Complexity is actually what you think about the wine. Are there other aromas and flavors that came into your mouth? And if there are, that's complexity. If there aren't, it doesn't have a lot of complexity. It's simple. And finally, finish and length. Does the finish last a long time in the mouth? Does it go on and on? The longer the finish, the better the perceived value of the wine. So it should get a higher score. However, some wines have very short finishes. And if they do, your wine teacher should tell you that, and I would. Okay, so let's taste this. I like to smell it one more time. It's sitting in the glass now for a couple minutes. Roll it around in my mouth and let it fill all the soft palate, all the gums, and I swallow it. I'm not much of a spitter. Okay, is it dry or sweet? It's dry. The body, what is the body like? Is it skim milk or is it cream? Well, you know what? This is kind of medium, full-bodied, maybe a whole milk. Now, acidity. The options are tart, crisp, fresh, smooth, or flabby. And this actually, I would give it something in between fresh and smooth. So, you know, fresh. Looking down at the acidity chart, I think the acidity is good here. So I'm going to go ahead and give it an 8. In a Mourvedre like this, which is what the French call a Monastrell, in this Monastrell from Spain, would I expect a high acidity like a Riesling? No, I wouldn't. So, you know, you have to think about the wine itself and whether it's supposed to be a high acid wine. The balance. Okay, let's make another clip. Okay, if you look at the center portion of the lower area of the tasting chart, you see balance is comprised of alcohol, acid, tannin, and sugars. And you've got scores from 1 to 10, 10 being perfectly in harmony with varietal and style. Perfect harmony with varietal and style. Or 1, completely horrid. They forgot something. And then you've got a gradient in between. So here you need to know what the varietal is and the style. So we have a Spanish Monastrell that should be full-bodied, smooth tannins, have nice flavors of berries and grapes, not be overly sweet. This is not a big, jammy California cab. This is a lean, food-friendly wine from Spain. You will want to have this with all of your Mediterranean dishes, roasted lambs and meats and those kinds of things, maybe even sausages. The acidity here would be perfect for a Spanish sausage because the acidity would cut like a knife through the fats in the sausage. So those things all make up balance. Alcohol. If the alcohol is out of balance, the wine will taste hot. It'll burn. It'll smell hot. It'll give you that burning sensation in your throat. Yeah, that's why it's important to have a wine that's in balance and why it's important to have a wine that's served at the right temperature. Often, wines that are served, red wines that are served too warm will burn the throat. And so you have to serve it at the right temperature so that that alcohol doesn't volatilize. It's 14.5% wine. That's quite a lot of alcohol in here. Okay, acidity, we've already talked about that. Tannins, if it's a white wine, you don't have to worry about tannins, but it's a red wine, and we do. Tannins are that mouthfeel. It's that little drying sensation on the mouth. And they should feel really smooth like beads, not rough like sandpaper, okay? And then sugars. How sweet is the wine? Is this really sweet like a White Zinfandel? Or is it too dry? What did they do? Did they get that right or not? Okay, let's taste it again because I want to think about the tannins. They're grippy. They sit on my tongue nicely. And yes, if I had a nice Spanish roast meat dish or even a paella, a kind of a something a little bit greasy, a cheeseburger, that would be great. Okay, so I think the balance is good here. You only have 3 options: good, fair, and unbalanced. It's good. And I think it's good enough for an 8. Is it the most perfectly balanced wine? No. What would make it perfectly balanced? The smoothness of the wine would be just amazing in my mouth. And it's not quite there. Okay. Complexity. Do I get other distinctive flavors? Not really. It shows up, but it's nothing special. So I'm going to go with a 5. And finish in length. Okay. I just drank it again. I can still taste it in my mouth. It's not giving me pleasing aromas in the finish, but the finish is still there. And so I look here and I think it's a good finish. I could give it a 3 or a 4, okay, but nothing to get excited about. But 5 and 6 seems better. 7 and 8, is it nice finish added to the sensation? Not really. So, but it's good. So I'll give it a 6 because 6 is where it's at. Now I do my math. Okay, so I've got all my scores. So I add 6, 8, 8, 5, and 6. Comes down to 33. I add 50 points to that. And my total is 83. Quite a few points away from Mr. Suckling's 91. But would they actually advertise an 83 on the bottle? Probably not. But here's the thing. Does that mean the wine is bad? No, it's not bad at all. The difference between tasting and drinking is thinking. And these are tasting charts. They're not drinking charts. We're thinking about this. We're trying to pry open the concepts of what makes this wine better or worse than another wine of the same type or category. You always have to judge wines next to each other. You can't just judge a Monastrell versus a Cab. They're not going to be the same. Even the regions will be different. So you need to take this as a snapshot of this Monastrell from 2019. And what did it taste like? To me, 83 points. Now, if I just open this bottle for dinner and we just drank it with dinner, that's just drinking. And that's just fine too. With the tasting chart, you can define that, you can turn it into thinking. It's the marriage of preference and science. And that's it. That's the 100-point scale. That's how you come up with 100 points using my custom tasting chart, and you can download that chart and use it at home or anywhere else you drink wine. The link is in the description. 100 points. This was 91 to James Suckling. It's 83 to me. It is preference, but it's science and preference. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and until next time, à tout à l'heure, and cheers. That's pretty good. I'll have another. What you say? Yeah, I know it's before lunch. No, I don't care. I like this wine.